Wade Stubbs was the most successful plantation owner.
That's why they call it the
He
Bailey Stubbs.
owned 3 other plantations upon his death, and he worked another one, or at least leased it, and he didn't work much. He also was the most prolific slave owner in the Turks and Caicos history, with, upon his death, 384 slaves registered to his name on those 3 plantations. But 90% of the slave owners in Turks and Caicos had 5 or fewer slaves. So he was way more than even the next one had 90-some. So he had an enormous chunk of the population of Turks and Caicos then under his direct control.
And we still have it building up?
The farm was primarily cotton, but also guinea corn, which he sold as a food for slaves to other plantations. He raised cattle for beef, sheep for mutton and wool, and just about any domestic animal you could think of was kept here on the plantation. He had an import-export business. He was later in his life a king's agent, so he was basically like a governor. And he died in Turks and Caicos. He died in 1822 before emancipation, and all of his wealth was left to 2 nieces and a nephew, and his wife, who he married late in life, she was the widow of another plantation owner, and she never had children of her own. He never had children with her, so what he left to her was the right to purchase 13 slaves out of his estate at a certain set price and sell them on at another price. So she made loads of money when he died and went to live in Grand Turk. He had 1 child, we suspect, with a slave that was named Joshua, because it was a slave registered to his name who was registered as mulatto and was freed upon his death, which was a fairly typical story among the loyalists. That is the history in a nutshell, very quickly. Except the epilogue, when Wade Stubbs died, his most of his estate of his holdings went to his nephew Henschel Stubbs, who had by that time salt interests in South Caicos. Although the law was against the law to separate slave families by this time in the history, Henschel Stubbs was the cousin then of the new king's agent, who was Wade Stubbs' nephew, also named Wade Stubbs. So Wade Stubbs signed the death notice of Wade Stubbs. That gets really confusing, of course, on paper. Henschel came here, took all of Wade Stubbs' male slaves with him to South Caicos, separated the families, which was illegal, but again, king's agent cousin, who's going to say anything? Which is the reason why Stubbs is a South Caicos name. North Caicos has very few, if any, Stubbs at all. And of course, after emancipation, there were all of these single lady slaves here, or ex-slaves, I should say, and people from neighboring islands and countries moved into the area. And that's why one of the reasons why Q has so many different surnames in it, whereas most of the other settlements just have 1 or 2 surnames. So the people continued to inhabit this land up until about 70 or 80 years ago. We still have people in Q today who were born up here in the slave quarters. The buildings that you'll see, the ruins, have signs on them that were put there in the 90s by a project that ran this site before the National Trust got a hold of it. They based their guesses of what the buildings were on a really, really bad undergraduate archaeological student report, and only 2 of them are correct. So they put beautiful, nice ceramic signs right on the buildings, cemented them into the historic structure, and all of them except for 2 are wrong. So primarily we're going to go through the town. This road, this is the original highway. It goes right through the middle of Wade Stubbs' town up there. He arranged it that way, of course. He had a shop and a church and cotton export building and everything, right down to the harbor where he had his shipping business. And we're going to go through the town and then down to where the well is, and the well is where the tropical dry forest is. So it's a totally different habitat from the rest. But you can see how much bigger the trees are here. So we're now entering the tropical dry forest. We have other birds, loads of migrants in here, Key West quail doves, pearly-eyed thresher, buntings and grosbeaks love to winter here. So this is a really important habitat for migrants and native birds.
Already done.
And the real forest has a proper herb layer, which we don't have anywhere else, like an actual ground cover. We get orchids and forbs and stuff growing on the ground, yeah. If we're lucky, we'll see a pygmy boa, Caicos pygmy boa, which is endemic. They're about this big, least offensive snake in the world. Ours is the only species of Tropodophis boa that does not do ocular auto-hemorrhaging as a defense mechanism, thank goodness, so they don't squirt blood out of their eyes when they're upset with you, like the other ones do. Yeah.
They have them that do that?
Yeah, what?
So ours don't do that, but the other ones, the Bahamian species and the Cuban and Hispaniolan species
That's
do.
probably why everybody hates snakes, particularly
You
these
said
guys.
it's
They
dead
think
bee,
they're like
right?
devil
Yeah, they're
one
about that
because
big.
basically,
No,
you
not
know,
the
shooting
bee.
blood out
No,
of your
I
eyes
have
is
I have
probably
a
not
rainbow
really the
boa, the
nicest
bigger
thing to do.
species, at my house, which if you so choose, we can see later. Right here. Oh, Caicos pygmy boa.
Oh, he was having a
What are we doing right now?
looking at a snake.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
What kind is it?
Caicos pygmy boa, Tropodophis greenwayi. That's a big
You
one.
want to see it. You just don't want to see it.
Yeah.
In
fact, what I'll do-
sometimes is then they leave the stinky stuff in your hand.
Watch the belly. The belly is checkerboard.
Oh, yeah.
Keep up with.
Oh, see, lovely. Can someone take a photo?
Four?
Oh, he's gorgeous. So cute.
Does it leave your hands stinky though? That's the only thing I always find. And then your hands stink
A little
snake for the rest of the day.
A little bit. The tail is made to look like a grub, so they bait their lizard prey with their food, with their tail.
Yeah, you have to wash your hands after handling snakes.
I have
don't
hand
you?
sanitizer in the bus if you want some.
Sam, can you get my phone and take a photo?
Where's the phone?
In my phone.
Oh wow.
Use my magic finger.
What feature? Are we going that way?
Oh, you're getting very active now.
Flash, if you want to, take them to the well, and we'll catch up. Can you do that?
Thank you, DeMarco. Can you send it or post it on Facebook or something?
Yeah, we have to go there for the tropical dry forest. That's what we're going. That's why we're going quickly.
Can you open it some?
Yeah, if you put him right here, he'll go back down. Yeah,
That's so sweet.
that's right where he was. Yeah. He's so cute, huh?
Really, really cute.
The most thing with most ruins.
Yeah. Yeah, where we're standing now. Yeah. And the jail was down there. That was a jail. When this was a courthouse, that was a jail. For 15 years. Yeah. What's really cool is when you come here at night and you shine your lights down, all of those little crevices have got a pygmy boa living in them. And they all poke their heads out, and as the baby frogs climb up the side, the pygmy boas eat the baby frogs that are coming out. And then we've got this beautiful thing, see the brown leaves? So this is satin leaf, which has metallic gold hairs on the, I have to get it in the sunlight.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So it's green on top.
Yeah, dark green on
Oh,
top.
that's pretty. Yeah.
Why? This is the only place in Turks and Caicos that I see these big tall trees.
We've got dirt here. We've got soil.
Okay.
So
Because the trees were never cleared here. This was left as a well reserve. And when you don't clear the soil and you don't clear the trash on the ground, the leaves, the fungus that keeps all of these trees alive, all of these trees have fungus growing on their roots. That is what makes them able to absorb the nutrients. When you burn that off or you scrape away it loses, that fungus is gone forever, and whatever you plant there is never going to thrive. So South Caicos doesn't have it more because it's so dry there.
it's like you said, that's salt.
Yeah, and the salt. Whereas like North and Middle we have this, but the reason Middle doesn't have much of this left is because almost the entire part of the upland of Middle Caicos was under cultivation for cotton. This area was left slightly intact. You can see some of the trees out there are quite big. I mean, we've got poisonwoods down here that are this big around. You know.
They could stay right there.
Yeah, yeah. And this is willow bustic. See this really straight one? That's what you use for a ship mast. Willow bustic is a ship mast straight through. So the trees here, they have to compete for light, which most of the Turks and Caicos, they don't have to. So the willow bustic does it by shooting up to the canopy as quick as it can and then worrying about branching out. The satin leaf does it by, this would actually probably have a really interesting signature, because what it does is the light goes through the leaf and the bottom of the leaf passes almost 100% of the light back up through the leaf. So it uses it can use the light twice rather than having some of it waste through, like the green light coming through. This one you can see because it's quite dark, right?
Yeah.
So it actually makes double use of the
Right.
that's why this one can grow in almost total shade. And then you've got things like the palmetto, which is going to store starch in its trunk under the ground. And then at some point it'll just go and grow a trunk really quickly, the palmetto there, yeah. And yeah.
So the willow that you pointed to,
Willow bustic, yeah.
how old would that
Oh,
maybe?
I would guess that was probably not here when the well was built. And so that isn't, I mean, maybe...
Is it indigenous?
It's, oh yeah, yeah, it's less than 220 years old, for sure, yeah. Because everything in this little well field would have been cut, at least, you know.
But you see, you've got some big planting behind there, son.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's Lysiloma, that's, you can see some fine leaves of it up there. That's the, what we call locust, and then you use that to build boats because the branches are quite curved, and you can use those to make the boat ribs. Yeah. Yeah. And you can hear there's a lot of birds up there. You won't see them very well, but if you play the call of a screech owl down here, all of these birds you can hear now are migrants.
What kind of screech owl?
Just North American. These are all migrant birds
North American.
that are here right now singing. So if you play North American screech owl, you'll get 20 species of warblers in 5 minutes. They'll all come in and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" Because you know birds are nosy, right?
You said it's a name, screech owl?
Screech
Go
owl.
on then, go on then.
You can try, yeah.
Go on.
Let's see what happens. Screech.
So we have
North American screech owl.
The Puerto Rican screech owl, but it hasn't been seen a long time in the BVI.
Okay.
And the Puerto Rican screech. A little
You
tiny
might need a blaster speaker.
What is man talking for?
I don't think
There you go.
birds hear that
You have to
one.
look for screech owl call.
Question.
Yeah.
This tree here.
Yeah, willow bustic. Yeah.
Is it only here, or you can find it elsewhere around the island?
Slash, where else? We don't see this much else except for around Q. Yeah, that's it. What's really weird is in the Bahamas, in the northern Bahamas, this is strictly a pine yard species. Whereas here, we don't ever see it in the pine. But it only grows in the pine in New Providence and Andros and all that. Yeah.
So is it that the soil type that caused it to be only here?
I think it loves water. It needs water.
All trees love water.
Yeah. It really needs a lot of water. Because we're also in a low area here, you know.
You could see the red mirroring the rise and fall of the land. So the darker red is in the bottom, and and then it's slightly lighter on the as you go out. Because this is a sort of big.
Yeah.
Yeah, eastern screech owl the same as the North American screech owl?
You'd need
Eastern
a
screech owl the same as the North American?
yeah, but you'd need a blaster speaker for it. You'd need a really strong to get it out there. It would have to be as loud as the real bird is.
And how are we gonna know that?
which is really loud.
You
Yeah.
can't do an imitation there next
Go on.
No, I
time?
can't.
Sure. That would
Well, that's not like something crying, boy.
Yeah, we can head back up and we'll just make a quick stop at the kitchen and look at some history stuff. And yeah, I was just telling earlier the widow of Tarrant Hill. There's another plantation over there that was a loyalist widow. Most of the loyalist widows that got land, they sold or rented the land to another plantation owner and went back to England. The widow of Tarrant Hill decided to stay, and there are 2 historic records talking about her. She was alone here, except for, and I'm quoting, her single faithful male slave, Fred.
Boy, Fred was dealing with that shit.
They had a house with 1 room only. And there was another reference to her that the Lady of Tarrant Hill was unwelcome in the church. So, I'll leave that up to you to decide what was going on, but I always thought, what an admirable person. And I also like her plantation because it's the only place in Turks and Caicos where we've ever documented the wonderful little plant called resurrection fern, which is a tiny little fern that gets all crinkly and dry, and then when it rains it goes poof, and it turns into a plant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I asked a little kid, what do you think we can learn about these people by looking at the pottery on the ground? She said, well, they were obviously really clumsy because they broke a lot of dishes. In this house, we also have our endemic barking gecko, which is a great big tokay-looking thing, Aristeliger hecti, and you won't see her today probably because she hides, but you can see her eggs.
Well, there you go. There's a little gecko running up the road.
Shells.
This is a big one.
A
he was
big one.
talking about.
That's the eggshells there. They've
So
hatched.
where will she be hiding?
She'll be up in one of these crevices, and if you come at night, you'll see her out on the wall. Big, chunky thing, fat thing. Sort of this length, like 8 inches or 10 inches, and fat. So we'll have a look at the kitchen.
This is cotton that we're looking at.
Yeah. So this kitchen was worked in by the Creole slaves, who were the people who were descended from, they were in 4 or 5 generations in slavery, not from Africa directly. They were allowed to live and work, they were allowed to work in the plantation town, but lived outside of it. But the reason I show people this building is the ship drawings. So if you see in the window frame there.
Oh, you have
Oh, wow.
plantation era graffiti.
Yes,
They call it.
yes. So these ship drawings are found throughout the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and Cuba, specifically on they're always ships, and they're specifically on plantations that have records of escapes or attempted escapes to Haiti. Because by 1801, the northern part of Haiti had declared its independence and declared an amnesty for slaves. They were the first country to constitutionally abolish all forms of slavery. So if you could get there as a slave, it was the only place in the world you could go that was you wouldn't get caught and resold into slavery. But in 1801, 14 of Wade Stubbs' slaves escaped. They stole one of his ships. They sneaked down into the harbor and they stole one of his ships and went to Haiti. And they got there. There are 12 of these complete drawings that we found in this building, and on most plantations, the drawings almost always correlate closely to just under the number of slaves that escaped. So if you think about it, if 10 were planning, maybe on the way out they woke up or attracted the attention of a couple more, so maybe they took more. But this escape was the only one that there was a discrepancy in the slave register of a child. Usually what would happen is the male of the family, because like I said, the laws protected the families to keep them together at the time, the male would escape to Haiti, work, get money, and then send the money or send a white Haitian back to buy the family out of slavery. And there were economic benefits to the slave owner to sell in the early 1800s. So they would do that, and then they would take them to Haiti. But if you were a parent who had one child and that was it, you never knew if your child was still going to be here, and so you wouldn't want to leave them. So this is the only time where there's a discrepancy in the slave register of one child, a 9-year-old child with a 30-year-old father. And this is also the only place...
So maybe what they took him?
Yeah, probably. Well, I mean, we can't, but we can connect the dots, right? Yeah. This is the only place where instead of having a ship, or a ship like that one a foot up from the buttress of the chimney, or one ship like the one in here, look at this. Big ship, little ship.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only design like that anywhere in any plantation. Big ship, little ship.
So like a
So
child and an adult.
We think that's what
Means
it
a
might
child
be.
and an adult. Like.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
must have been such a big thing, mustn't it?
Yeah.
To get out.
Mm. And to get to a country that was actively at war and wasn't any more secure really than the position here, and spoke a completely different language and had a totally different culture, but they made it. Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities with what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. isn't there?
Yeah.
Huge.
And we know they made it because the name Stubbs is still found in Cape Haitian. Yeah.